Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live Instagram. My name is Christian, and today I'm going to be talking to Teacher Will from Ask Teacher Will. I'm going to be talking to him about language and culture, which is a subject that we're both pretty interested in, and of course, Teacher Will brings a huge amount of energy and passion to his live performances. So I'm super happy to be talking to him today. So I'm just gonna wait for Will to request. Okay, here we go. Let's go. Teacher Will, how are you, sir?
Teacher Christian, I'm wonderful. It's Friday. I'm alive. I'm grateful. How are you?
I'm feeling really good. But I have a feeling that I'm never feeling quite as good as you.
It's interesting. I heard he brings a whole amount of energy and amount. Listen, we bring energy in different ways, and so I am quiet, contrary to most popular people's belief. I am kind of quiet, but you know, that's off live Instagrams, I guess. But I'll
So
mellow
listen,
out. I will adapt I'll adapt your energy, but I feed off your energy, so it is what it is.
well, listen. Today we're going to be talking some more about language and culture, but
Okay.
but but before we do that, I have a question, right?
Yes, sir.
So you have your Instagram page, Ask Teacher Will. You have a YouTube channel, Ask Teacher Will. Why are you doing this?
Okay, so very quickly. Years ago, basically, why am I doing this? So basically, for me, is I made a promise to the God of my understanding and four individuals that I called the core member. I had no idea, to be honest with you, any intention to get on social media at all. I thought I was dumb. I thought I was stupid. I didn't think that I had anything to contribute because I was too old. And then the four core members were like, yo, Teacher Will, you really need to think about it. So I prayed about it. My God said yes, and then I made a promise. For me, I want to be of service. I want to change the face of English. There are each themes that I have going each year. So when I first started doing, I wanted to change the face of English, and what I mean by that is that hopefully just share my experience, be of service to the world in terms of what I believe English has the potential to be, from sharing my own experience as a native English speaker, sharing my experience as a certified qualified instructor, business experience, now teaching experience. And so for me, it's basically to be of service, change the way that English is thought about the world, and also to be the representation about that I want to be. And the final thought is hopefully to motivate and inspire others to accomplish their English goals, because the theme for this year is 2020 motivation, inspiration through English. And so hopefully by doing that, it's changing the paradigm in terms of what people might think about English.
I think that's awesome. And that kind of brings me to my next question, the next thing I want to talk about, which is
Sure.
because you don't have a website where you're selling courses, or you're not selling like PDFs because you earn money from your teaching, your job that you have, right? But um, you recently uploaded a video to YouTube, and in the video you said, "What is the best way to learn language?" Right?
Very
And
similar to yours. Great minds think alike.
yeah,
Yes, I'm sorry. Let me let you finish with your question.
yeah. So basically, the first part of my question is, what is the best way to learn English? And the second part of the question is, what do you think about the connection between, the best way to learn English and making money?
Got it. Okay, so a couple parts. So for me, first, let me go back to something very quick. So yeah, I'm a face-to-face teacher, things of that nature. You're asking a website and things of that nature. To be honest with you, those are works in the progress. I do teach online, and I teach privately in groups, but I don't. A lot of people don't know that about me. You know, I do that. I'm very selective in terms of people who I took to, because it's kind of like I take it seriously. So I usually say like, yo, if you're interested, then contact me, DM. I have a whole process. Maybe a website and stuff will be down the future and more formalized courses and imitate like my brother like you. Not a language school physically, so thank you very much for that. I give you props. But for me, I think, okay, so the best way to learn English and money. So here's the dealio in my humble opinion. I think the question is, I understand why the question occurs, but I don't think that is the right question. And oftentimes, why do I say that? Because English is an individual journey. And as I said in my video, there is no best way to learn English. That's not the proper question, in my humble opinion. The appropriate question, or the question that at least I wanted to put in the forefront of people, is finding the best way to learn English that works for you, i.e. the learner, i.e. the student. There is no best way at all. And with all due respect, you have people in the industry that promote that. Okay, that's fine. But think about your own native language. Everybody on this call, everybody that can hear both of our voices, we're individuals. We have our own way of learning. We have our own way of perceiving the world. And so therefore, you have to find the way that works for you. And so in the video I gave, or what I tried to do is that I tried to give like, hey, the typical 3 ways of learning, you know, self-study, universities, online, things of that nature. But more importantly, what I think is the attributes necessary for learning. So there is no best way. If anybody tells you that, with all due respect, they're lying, they're bamboozling. And as a learner, you might want to ask yourself, is that applicable? Now, with respect to the best way that works for you in terms of money, well, okay, so how honest do you want me to be, Mr. Christian?
I want you to be a pillar of truth, my friend.
Well, I don't necessarily know if I'll pillar a truth, but I'll give my truth. So there is a correlation in terms of like anything in life, ladies and gentlemen. Let's expand. I want learners to think about, and family members to think about their life or think about English, right? So what is the association in terms of learning the best way that works for you and money? Well, learners, family members, you have a choice. If indeed that you don't want to pay for money, you don't want to pay for courses, you don't want to pay for a language school, you don't want to pay for online tutoring, face-to-face tutoring, FYI, you don't have to. That's why you have self-study. But yet, right, and each method has its process, each method has its advantages or disadvantages, right? But there is a value associated with paying for service. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, reality check. Teaching is a profession. It's an industry. People make billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars with respect to the teaching industry. So whether you're a language school, whether you're a private coach, tutor, face-to-face, online, learners, people have a right to charge for that. And you decide if indeed you want to make that investment. You make that investment based on what your current budget is and the particular needs that a person will have. Like when people come to me and they say to me, it's kind of like, hey, and this is just me since you want truth. They're like, well, teacher, do you teach online, privately? Yes. What's your price list? Well, you know what? I don't even entertain those students. I don't even entertain those learners. I understand and respect the fact that people have a budget, number one. And I understand that for many, people are, or one variable is price. I get that. Well, reality, you can find somebody out there teaching English for as little as $1 per hour, all the way up to $1,000 per hour. That's fine. But what I recommend to students is, if you want to come to me online or face-to-face, whatever like that, that you have a right as a learner, or you should at least consider or think about, that before you're going to make a financial investment in yourself, that you might want to interview the respective people. So when somebody says to me, like, what's your price? I'm like, you know what? I'm like, thank you very much, not interested. There are many different tutors. Not because I'm better than anybody else, I'm not. But for me, teaching is a partnership, it's a collaboration. My process is if you are considering entering into a business arrangement that is based on hopefully respect and partnership, then what I want to do is that I want to have at least a 20-minute conversation with you via Instagram to figure out if we're a match, if we're in simpatico, if there's a partnership, so that you get to know about my style, you get to know about my approach, you get to know about my methodology of teaching, and I get to know about you. That is the free trial. So for me, learners, if you're looking for somebody, at least you owe that to yourself. And then you make a determination if you're willing to pay what my price is, Christopher's price is, or whatever. But if you don't do that to yourself, learners, I think with all due respect, you're doing your disservice. Why? Because teaching is a profession. And whether or not you decide to engage with someone for 1 month, 2 months, 1 week, or whatever, you owe that to yourself. So please, if you're interested in tutoring with Teacher Will, please don't send me a DM message and be like, oh, what's your price? Because I'll be like, thank you very much. But what I will say is if you're interested, where do you live? Are you available? So there is at the end of the day, you pay for what you get for it. And learners, here's what I would also have you to think about and consider when thinking about teachers. Number one, when you sit back and you say, and again, I understand price is a consideration. I'm very honored about that. Is that your only consideration? Is price the only variable for you? You might want to consider, or is there a match? Do you get a sense of intuition, a good vibe? What is the teacher's qualifications? And for me, qualifications has to do with skills, talents, approach to teaching, certification, all of that. And then you make an educated guess. But a lot of times what happens is that learners will come to Christian, maybe, he can answer, or they'll come to me and be like, well, do you offer free classes? And my response is this. When I drop a live Instagram, that's a free class. When I drop a YouTube video, that's a free class. And I don't have a problem doing that because that is it. That there will always or usually be a part of ATW that's for free. But if you're requiring additional services, there is a price. And oh, by the way, some people in certain parts of William Land, you respect nothing for free at all.
I think that, man, there's so much stuff you've said there. And I think the first important thing is that, you know, you said that students have the choice to self-study, right? That's the decision they make, self-study. And as you said, that's free, you know, and there's so many free resources. It's a wonderful world. But I think the most important thing that you've said, you know, that students really need to start understanding is that they have to be smart with their money, you know? Stop wasting your hard-earned money on these promises, you know, like get fluent in 3 weeks. And
Yes. 1 month.
Exactly. And
Yes.
and as you said, you know, stop wasting your money by choosing a teacher who maybe their only qualification is they're a native speaker, right? Go and find a teacher that's just a great teacher, no matter what the price is. I think it's good advice.
Okay. Well, Christian, here's what I would say, 2 quick points. Number one, just because I'm a native English speaker, let me say this. Learners, please hear me. Hear me well. You don't have to agree with what I say. It's just my opinion. It's my perspective, whether we can agree to disagree. Just because I am from the United States of America and I'm a native English speaker does not make me a good teacher. My native language is English. My native language is English. And just because I am from America, glad to have a passport, does not make me necessarily a good teacher. And I understand the need or the desire for some to have natives. That's fine. Listen, choices are choices. I could care less. If you prefer what you prefer, that's fine. But that should not be the only consideration. And oftentimes it goes to Christian's point. What happens is respectfully, teaching is it's a art, it's a profession, it's a skill that can be acquired by anybody that has the desire, the passion, the education to do it. Now, maybe I'm going to say something that sounds a little rude or it sounds a little crazy, but it's my opinion and we can agree to disagree. When you're spending your money and you're making an investment in yourself, you choose. And some of us, I think what happens is it's not only on the aspect of whether they're native, non-native, But it's like, okay, how do they look? What's their is the person qualified? Some of you, again, and again, I'm going to say something possibly, it depends on, people teach for various different reasons. So I will say it like this. People teach for various different reasons. Some people teach on social media. Some people teach in language schools, English schools. Teachers teach for various different reasons. That's fine. For me, what I chose to do is I chose to go back and get qualified and certified. I'm not saying that's the only qualification. I'm not saying that's the only variable. But I'm saying for me, I chose to do that because it was like, okay, I came from the business world and I was entering an international, leaving my country of America, going elsewhere. And for me, I was like, for me to be qualified, that was part of the process. I wanted to have what we say, the sheepskin. That's one of the variables. Along with, sheepskin means college degree, university, some sort of certification. Sheepskin can also, in slang language, mean a condom. So I'm not talking about a condom. I'm talking about sheepskin, okay? I'm talking about, for me, I wanted to be a certified, qualified instructor. I wanted to know what it was to teach English as a second foreign language or as a foreign language or second language, right? That was what I chose to do. And so for me, what I would say is, in your choices, learners, in your choices family of looking, is the person qualified? Right? Do they have this? Do they have the educational background? Do they have the work experience? Do they have the personality? Do they have the talents? That's like what I find interesting is, and again, I understand, and Christian, I could say things that are controversial, but I'm giving you my opinion. If I'm going to go to a doctor, am I going to go to a doctor that has no work experience being a doctor, that has no education being a doctor, that has no certifications being a doctor? I wouldn't. But yet we say that teaching is like a profession, and yet some of us don't have the professional developments, don't have the educational development, and don't have the certifications. Now, that's not a judgment, because I can only worry about myself, and I'm talking. But for me, that's one of the reasons. And then it was, so yes, I'm certified, qualified, TESOL. I have work experience, domestically. So all of those things, learners, are in your ability to choice, and personality is important. But what some learners do, which they have a right to do because it's not my money, what they do is, oh, well, we like that, okay, that person is from William Land, or that person is from that country, or that person looks like that, or they drop a video on that, and they show one thing, and yet, and still, but I just gave them $100 or $50, whatever, that said I could learn English in 30 days and I didn't learn anything. You wasted your money. Because if you did not learn, real quick, if you didn't learn English, if you did not learn your native language in 1 month or 3 weeks, how the heck do you think you can learn English in like 1 week? But learners, y'all might want to think about that. I'm done. Oh, I got energy.
Exactly.
You give me energy now.
No, listen, exactly. And listen, I want to talk about something that you said at the very beginning. You said that you're doing this because you want to change the face of English teaching. And I think when you say that, you also mean literally, because we talked about before that the reality is that you don't look like a lot of English teachers, right? And
what does
people
do I don't do I, what does an English teacher look like? Maybe I do, maybe I do. I don't know. What do you mean by that?
Exactly. Exactly, right? And you know, people students, again, this is part of the thing about students making bad decisions. They'll say, well, you know, maybe I'm not going to learn from that teacher because he doesn't look like, you know, James Bond, or he doesn't look like, right. You know what I mean? So
right.
I think it's so important what you're doing as far as trying to change the paradigm. I really do.
Thank you for the compliment, number one. And I would say likewise as to you. That's why I have utmost respect for you, and you know that, and we talk about that offline. I want to talk about a couple things. Number one is, for me, representation becomes really important. And I remember when I first started on social media or whatever, I think It was the theme that I had, Change the Face of English. And I did a whole theme on it. And I had different learners that volunteered around the world that wanted to learn English. And they looked different ways. Now, let me say it like this. For me, if English is a global international language, if English is the official language in some countries, in over 50 countries, then what becomes important for me is that English, if the language is international, then why is it that for some that English is only, and this is a challenge for the learners to think about, all right? But why is it that when sometimes people think of teaching, they only think of teaching from a particular country, from a particular gender, from a particular race, all of that stuff? And representation is important. Because if we go back to our initial premise, that English, I usually say this, English is not monolithic. English doesn't care about your race, your ethnicity, your how rich you are, how much money you make, who you love, who you don't love, what you believe, what don't you believe. English don't care about that. Because English is a language for communication. Representation becomes important. It is necessary, I believe. So one of the reasons is this. Hey, listen, I'm not saying that there was not, because I'm not that intellectually disingenuous. What I'm saying is that when I got on social media and decided to do it, I didn't see a lot of, did I see a lot of teachers that were American? Yes. But let me keep it 100 with you for a minute. I did not see a lot of teachers that happened to be American, that happened to be African American, Black American, and that happened to be a male. You don't leave, that's important. Oops, sorry. That is important. Why? Because English is a global language. There are certain people that I will reach, and I don't expect to reach everybody because some people don't like my method of teaching, they don't like my teaching style. But representation becomes important. Why? Because it's a global international language. The same with Christian. Christian will touch certain people that he will get that I won't get. But learners, if you say that the language is global and international, here's what I would encourage you to do if you want to do it. And it just does not apply to teaching. I would say it applies to any content that you want to put out there. Be the representation that you want to be. Because if you're waiting for somebody to sit back and create that, maybe that's your passion, maybe that's your job at first. And learners, what I would have you think about with respect, let me make an I statement. What I had to recognize and realize is that maybe there are certain cultural biases out there. Maybe there are certain assumptions out there that what teaching is looks like a certain way or is a certain race, ethnicity, gender, things of that nature. That's not right. That's not wrong. That's a reality. So if you're quote unquote, let's say you're from William Land and everybody has color, but language is important. Would you have certain challenges that maybe Christian and I do not have because we're men? Well, yeah, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it. Everybody has challenges. There are isms in the world. Isms exist. But just because those isms, and you can figure out what the isms are, you can determine that. But just because isms exist does not mean that it's not possible that you can do it. And sometimes if you're the first, whatever the first means, you might have to sometimes walk along. And one last comment, Teacher Kristen. Teacher Wellington, how are you, teacher? I am not angry. Perhaps you're not used to my communication style, which goes into culture, because people convey themselves in different ways. I am an extremely passionate person that gives my opinion, and you might not be used to the particular communication manner that I'm aware of. And what is interesting is to understand the impact that culture makes, just as an FYI, because maybe you're not aware of that. I wonder if you would say that to teach a Christian that he's angry. Because oftentimes that you might not be aware of, so it's not right or wrong, it's just an education aspect. It's very interesting that when sometimes an African American male has a sense of self, speaks in a manner that is articulate or confident, that sometimes that is, at least in my experience, is considered angry. And I wonder if that would be applied to other people, such as Christian or anyone else that happens not to be black. So it goes to what we think of stereotypes and biases that transcends race and gender and religion and class, all of that. So just to clarify, Teacher Wellington, I'm not angry at all. But when you say he seems angry, I just want to share a personal experience with you. I've heard that a lot of times in my life, and I've also heard other African American males say that, and other people of color say that. So that's just something that you might not be aware of. So that's why we do live Instagrams. Not insulting you at all, just making you aware of a different cultural experience.
Well, it's funny because you said before that that there are some people who might not like your teaching style. I want to know who these people are so that I can find them and hunt them down and eliminate them.
Listen, Christian, at the end of, thank you for that compliment. At the end of the day, I don't, listen, when I got on social media and even when I teach face-to-face or even when I teach online, if I'm doing private classes or group classes, I don't expect everyone to like me at all. I don't expect that because I'm a human being and I've lived long enough on the earth to recognize and realize that, hey, my approach to the world, my approach to teaching is different ways. And so I don't expect that. But what I do think is important is that oftentimes that we as learners don't think about it, and I want the learners to think about this as well, is how is there, we all, well, let me make an I statement. I have biases. I view the words to the world, and so, everybody's not going to like my particular style, and that's okay. I have my particular niche. I have my particular view, and I think that's the beauty of social media, and I think that's the beauty of the ESL industry. What I would hope that learners think about is that do they, and I love this point that you said earlier in a previous conversation, do learners or have learners thought about their perception of English, how they learn English, how they acquire the language, the impact that culture makes, the biases that they might have. If you say somebody, well, this teacher is from China, or this teacher is from Spain, versus if this teacher is from Australia or English, have they thought about that? And again, under the premise that English is a global international language. So representation for me, I think that, English language is like life, is like art. And one can make a definition that if one subscribes to this, that English can be considered an art, and that art should imitate life. I mean, we kind of say that with music. Music is a reflection of what the culture or society goes through. I think English should be the same. Now, we could go into historical reasons why it looks like certain ways, and I think that you said that on a call right now that we're in that transformation. But I think that's the beauty of a language. It's not monolithic. It can be owned by anyone.
Well, there's this really great quote from, he's the editor of the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, and he said that people are always willing to accept that language changes over time, right? Like they know that the language that we speak now is different from the language that Shakespeare used, right? But people are never willing to accept that language is changing in their lifetimes.
Oh, that, I like that, Christian. And I think to you, I would follow up by saying this. Now, what you're going to see, learners, is another side of Teacher Will that is still see, this is what we do as teachers, right? We wear many different hats. So others, now what you're going to see is that, hey, another way, because remember, learners, we communicate in different ways, right? We communicate in different ways. So this is the passionate side that's a little bit more subdued. Teacher Christian, what I think you reminded me of something where it's kind of like, hey, it's interesting. We as humans, I've thought about this in my own life, and particularly as it relates to my life personally, but also teaching, is that how funny it is that change is the one constant of the universe. And yet, people are sometimes apprehensive of changing that. And I think it goes to your very point where it's kind of like, well, you know what? We know that English is changing daily. I mean, think about 40 years ago. There was no word 40 years ago for Google, right? Google it. Exactly. So I've recognized in my own life, well, wow, you know what? Hey, change is the one constant of the universe. But yet, how interesting it is as a human being, I've had to ask myself this question, am I willing to change? Am I willing to change personally? That's my business, but certainly as an instructor, am I willing to look at my different communication style? Am I willing to look at the way that I hopefully teach in different teaching methods? Am I willing to sit back and say, okay, what change could I do in terms of receiving feedback? What change can I do? Because I think for me, life, that's important in my own life, but I think that's one of the essential ingredients that I believe is necessary to be what I would call at least an effective teacher and hopefully good teacher. Like if I'm teaching ING, the president, the same way after 9 years, then there's got to be something the matter with me.
No, you're so right. And if you look at where a lot of professional linguists, where they work in universities, they work in the psychology department.
Yes.
They don't work in the language department because, really language is all about the people that use it, right? And actually that brings me to, so I want to talk about this piece of research, okay?
Okay.
It's from this woman called Angelica Galante, who works at McGill University in Canada. And she created this questionnaire to find out if people really understand about the connection between language and culture, right?
Ooh.
So I thought I could kind of respond, right?
Got it.
So, okay, you ready for this?
Yes.
Question number 10. I don't want to learn about other cultures in the future.
I disagree for me.
Yeah.
Because
so imagine, and I'm going to frame the question. So imagine a learner from Indonesia, and they want to learn English, but they don't want to learn anything about English culture.
Okay, so here's what I would answer that. I love that question. So briefly, what I would say is this. In my own personal experience, when I'm learning a language, I don't leave who I am at the door. I don't leave the fact that I wear glasses at the door. I don't leave the fact that, hey, you know what, I'm a father, I'm a son. I don't leave those things at the door. So I think for those individuals that haven't thought about that, I think there is a direct symbiotic relationship as it relates to learning a language and culture, if we define culture as a group of norms. So I think it's a very interesting question that at least I don't do. I wonder if learners have ever thought about that. So I don't think, for me at least, it's possible. And in addition to that, the reason why I think it's very applicable to understanding, again, if English is a global international language, the way English is perceived in one part of the world is not the same, and the way that it is approached is different. So I think I can't do it.
Yeah. Okay. No, look, I totally, I totally agree. I mean, trying to separate language and culture is like trying to separate, Italians from pasta. It's just not.
Exactly. Like, I'm going to leave the pack of William at the door. Maybe I would.
Okay.
Maybe I'll try it. Okay. Go ahead. Next one.
Okay, question number 12. I understand that there are differences between cultures and that what can be considered strange to one person may be considered normal to another. And I want to ask about this, especially since you live in Saudi Arabia, right? Which is
yes,
total,
completely different.
American culture, Saudi culture. Wow.
Yeah. So I would say it like this. First of all, hey, Emma, how are you? I start pronunciation with Emma. Here's my thought. I think what I've learned in terms of learning, and I think you could attest to this too, Christian, if you want to share. For me personally, I think that one of the greatest things that I've had in terms of, certain things in my life has had the ability to live in a different culture. And for me, I think what I've learned, and I continue to learn, is this, that living in another culture has made me have an appreciation for certainly my own and definitely for someone else's. And from that, oftentimes people have asked me like, well, hey, what do you like about Saudi Arabia? What don't you like about Saudi Arabia? And my response is normally this. There's certain things that I love about Saudi Arabia. For example, I love the weather, I love the food, I love the Corniche. And then when people say to me what I don't like about Saudi Arabia, I normally say to them, well, isn't that if they're in the culture, right? I typically will say, why are you asking me that question? What don't you like about your culture? Because with all due respect, it's not really my viewpoint to answer. What I normally respond to that is, that's not really my cultural perspective. That's number one. Number two, what I would say is sometimes that's a setup question, which leads me to a greater point, at least what I try to do personally, and then hopefully what I try to do, well, prayerfully, I try to do this personally, but certainly in terms of being a professional, what I try to do is that I normally challenge my students. I did this one time in class with my upper intermediate learners. We had a conversation. It was a speaking exercise and writing exercise. And I said, okay, I just picked out certain countries of the world. I won't use the countries. I'll use Christian Land, William Land, Emma Land, and John Land. And I said, when you think of people from John Land, tell me what you think of. Write what you think about Christian Land, Emma Land, whatever of that nature. And I said, describe their culture. What are you thinking? And so my point is, what I try to do with my learners is have this. You might have aspirations. If there are 7 billion people in the world and you have aspirations that you want everybody to look like you, believe like you, and have your same culture, maybe that'll be, but it hasn't happened in the last 1,000 years. So with that being said, understanding two things, for me at least, and I use it at that diversity and cultural acceptance. You can have any aspect, you can think about whatever you want to about that from a moral perspective. But when it comes to acceptance and culture from a business perspective, then that's extremely important, because you can make a hell of a lot of money of that, number one. And number two is, do not ask. I find it interesting that some people, if it applies, some people that I've experienced in my life, some people that ask to be accepted for who and what they define they are, and yet instill that they want acceptance from their culture, and yet are not willing to do to others. That is hypocritical to me. And I don't necessarily know that people have thought about that. So for me, at the end of the day, yes, we say that we're human beings, and this is maybe a little bit too honest. Do I believe at the end of the day that we're all human? Yes. But do I understand, at least in my own experience, that everybody does not believe in openness and acceptance and tolerance? Yes. And so for me, I like how that's engaged, because certain things you say, what you might do in Christian Land is completely different in William Land. But you know what? For me, I have to accept the fact that you are human. And I have to accept your humanity. And that, to me, is more important than tolerate, because tolerate is a word that I get a little scared of. It's easy to tolerate if you're in a position of power.
I love that, right? Because tolerate implies that there's something bad that you have to that's below you, right? It's like a hierarchy, and you're at the top. It's exactly that. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, can I use Christian Land for a minute?
Oh, please.
So let's say, for example, we're in Christian Land, and everybody, and actually you know this because psychiatry, research has shown this. Let's say we're in Christian Land, for example, and Christian is the dominant society, whatever that dominant society is. And they actually did an exercise, so learners, you need to research this. In Christian Land, 90% of the people have blue eyes. And from the time, are your eyes blue, Christian? I'm sorry. Are your eyes blue?
Yes, they are.
Oh, sorry. So in Christian Land, everybody has brown eyes, and that's the dominant society. And from the time you're a very young age, you were taught that if you have brown eyes, you're better than anybody else, or things of that nature. And anybody with different eyes, that, hey, you know what, you're suspicious, whatever. So it's interesting when we talk about this tolerance, accept, respect. If people in Christian Land grew up with that mentality and say, oh, yeah, we love everybody with blue eyes, hazel eyes, pink eyes, all that other stuff. And yet, let's say the population has now changed from 90% of people with brown eyes to now 50% with blue eyes. What would be the answer? What would be the thought on that, particularly if I grew up in that environment? And ladies and gentlemen, it goes to the point, there's research done on that. Everybody has sat back and said, it's like, hey, what would be the change? I mean, there's been studies on child have done that. And so again, I think it's important to understand your culture in terms of learning English. And then if you want to, not that you have to, if you want to think about how that impacts your interaction. Perfect example. What happens, ladies and gentlemen, if you're learning English and you have people different from your cultural experience? How do you relate to them? How do you communicate to them? What might be offensive to, like if in Christian's culture, for example, if it's offended that I shake his hand, right? Or if he's a woman, as an example, right? So you have to understand those cultural nuances that it applies in terms of acquiring the language.
Well, to talk about a kind of personal story, one of the reasons that I left Australia was because I didn't really fit with the culture very well. And what's really interesting is how obviously everybody's an individual, but members of societies in general, they have different kind of cultural hierarchies, different things they consider
Yes.
important. And I was on an aeroplane from Bali in Indonesia to back to Perth in Australia, and so the plane was full of Australians who'd just been on holiday in Bali, and I was making small talk, and I said to this Australian couple, I said, "Hey, so did you like Bali? How was it?" And the first thing that they both said was, "Yeah, they don't have a lot of health and safety in Bali. There's people riding scooters on the sidewalks, and there's like lots of cracked pavement and electrical wires everywhere, and wow." And to me, if that is your kind of number one takeaway from being in that culture, I think that you have failed to open your mind. You failed to open your mind as an international citizen.
Well, look, Christian, two quick points, because a learner asked this question. Learners, again, I think when somebody said, what's the best way, one of the learners said, what's the best way to learn about a culture? Again, I think it's the best way to learn English. You find out the best way that works for you, and then also in addition to that, I think you have an opportunity to find out the best way to learn a different culture. At least for me, it starts with knowing my own culture, how I define that, knowing my biases. And then, I would say one way that I've learned or try to understand is by having personal knowledge. Not just the internet. I think the best way to learn about somebody else's culture is if you have a connection, an affiliation for that other culture. Because, news is relative and truth is relative. But with that being said, I would say this to your point. Learners, these are glasses, right? And these two things are a lens. And what I've thought in my life, and I try to do my students is that, I have a lens. I see the lens. I see the world based on my particular lens. That's not right. That's not wrong. I then have to ask myself, do I recognize and realize that everybody doesn't see the world like me? So to, I think, your point, Christian, it's not right or wrong. I mean, that's how they view it. But I would hope, going back to language, going back to culture, goes on to humanity, if people aspire to that. Everybody doesn't see the world like you do. You might want them to. And you make a decision. Because I'm not here to be very clear, learners. I'm not here telling you to be something you aren't, whatever. I'm talking about my experience. What I choose to do is recognize and realize, and I'm like, you know what? Hey, if you're born in America with a certain experience, with a certain, economic status, all of that other stuff, you have a certain lens. And everybody doesn't think that, which goes to, I think, a bigger issue, learners, that you might want to think about if it applies to you. Having empathy. One of the biggest things that I've had to learn in my life is to have empathy and to put myself in someone else's shoes and situation. For all of it, because there are some people that I know, it's like, well, how does that relate to English? Why didn't he learn that language? Why didn't she learn that English? Why are they learning English like this? Why are they... Yo, William, it ain't even teacher, Will. It's like, William, do you have empathy for someone else about what it is to walk in their shoes? And I think, last point, without going too deep, I think, and this sounds really crazy what I'm about to say. I don't know why I thought this, but I'm going to say it. I think for me, unfortunately, or my hope and prayer is that, at least I've thought in my own life, and how can I apply this? Unfortunately, with us being in this current corona pandemic around the world, it's given me a new appreciation, and hopefully it will continue in my life, a new mindset. I thought I was an empathetic person before in my life. Well, to be honest with you, I have a hell of a lot more to work that I need to do on myself. Empathy. Beside other things, but empathy. Learners, learning a language is hard. Hell, life is sometimes hard. In my own life, I'm talking about my own life. You know, life sometimes is hard, but I think the greatest experiences that I had in my life is when I was able to at least imagine myself in someone else's situation. Because at the end of the day, I recognize I am very privileged. And there's nothing the matter with privilege, but I recognize it. And with that, it doesn't mean that I don't expect everybody to be the same like me.
When are you going to start the Teacher Will Philosophy YouTube channel?
Well, you know what, but interestingly enough, you know what the interesting thing is that it's funny when people say to me, "Oh, Teacher Will, I want to know you. I want to know more about you," and I'm like, here's a little secret in case people don't know. I'm like, do you watch my videos? Like, do you see my videos? Because how I don't think I teach I don't consider myself a traditional teacher. So I think, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I think when people say that, I'm kind of like, well, look at the content that I do and listen to the live Instagrams that I do, because I think, you know, it's something that you said earlier. For me, my approach to English is, it's what you said, Christian. People, and even I thought this as a learner, someone who speaks a foreign language, and hopefully as a better individual that happens to be a teacher, people don't understand, in my humble opinion, or I've had to understand, the impact that psychology and mindset and culture plays. And so, you know, I think if people say that, you know, thank you for the philosophy, I'm like, well, it's kind of in my videos, but again, that's people's bias. But that's my niche, you know what I mean? I'm not supposed to do it your way or anybody else. That's the beauty of social media. So my approach when I say motivation through English is like interesting. Like I have a video coming out later tonight after I eat. Most people would not think that that is traditional English, right? The name of the video is Everything You Need is on the Other Side of Fear. And people are going to look like, what the f-? Sorry, I said a bad word. Sorry. Anyway, you know, I think it goes to like, the beautiful thing about English is that you can learn English on anything. So whether you want to, am I a teacher? Sure. Am I a human being? Yes. Am I a philosopher? Yes. But that's all of me. So I don't know. Maybe when
Look, I think no teacher will have success in the classroom if they do not understand humans, like they understand.
Yes, it's human. The amount, it's so much human come on, Christian, you and I know this. Like, learners, I've said, I believe, I'm sorry, let me use myself. I believe. Do you notice, learners, how I talk about myself? Now, if you can relate to that, if there's a, right? I normally don't talk about other people. For me, it works about talking about myself. Learners, I know a foreign language. Do you know the fear and the doubt and the negative thoughts that I had in my mind about learning a language? I'm never going to learn this. Why do I want to learn this? This shit is hard. Excuse me for saying shit, okay? Don't kill me. You know,
no, go.
You know, like this stuff is hard. And so I often think that sometimes that because we're native, that people assume that, number one, we don't know another language, or that life is hard, but for me, what I've learned is that the biggest lessons I've learned in my life is when I've been the most down, when I've been the most defeated, and when I thought I fell the most, that I couldn't learn this phrase, that I couldn't learn this idiom, that this teacher wants me to go up and give a presentation to people I don't even know. I'm like, what I learned in my life, and I continue my learning, is like, well, darn it, just because I fall down does not mean that I cannot get back up. But do I have the MCC? Do I have the motivation? Do I have the courage? And do I have the confidence in myself? And learners, that to me is the biggest impact. Maybe this is too philosophical. You know, I view English as life. When you go through shit in life, sorry about my English, when you go through crap in life, when you go through crap, sometimes do you ask yourself, do you have the motivation, the courage, and the confidence? And that, learners, starts in my own life from within. I might get motivated by it or inspired by a video that Christian drops. I might sit back and be like, well, damn, the last video that he did, y'all better check it out. Great minds think alike. Thank you, Christian, right? If y'all didn't see that video that Christian did, you better check it out. You can look at a piece of art or walk in the street or be at your house even now in Corona and look at something and be like, wow, I'm going to do it. But there has to be something on the inside of you. And I usually say to people, you know what? My job as an instructor, teacher, philosopher, crazy person, angry person, mad person, whatever you want to call me, I don't care. But my job or my passion, right, is to sit back and have you think about this, learners. When it comes to your English, you never take you out of the equation. And you have the flame inside of you, that fire, that desire, that passion, that oomph. And what my job is, hopefully, is to help you light the spark. Because it ain't one of the things that I respect about Christian. I'll shut the hell up after this. And I agree with him. It's like, you know what? Sometimes, learners, you give your teachers too much credit. Sometimes, let me talk about myself because that ain't right. Sometimes you all give me too much credit. Oh, Teacher Will, I love you. Oh, Teacher Will, you motivate me. Oh, Teacher Will, I feel so encouraged. I'm grateful for that. I'm humbled about that. But damn it, it ain't about me. It's about you. Because there had to be something in the inside. When I drop a video or I do Instagram or I teach teach online or whatever like that, I usually say to my students, first thing, it ain't about me. It's about you. Never take learners you out of the equation and never put at least me on a pedestal. I'm a human being that happens to be a teacher. And if I care more about your English than you do, with all due respect, there is something the matter with you. Was that too honest? I'm sorry.
Man, come on. You know what this needs? This doesn't need an Instagram Live. This needs a stadium full of people. That's what we need, man.
It's all the Christian. You know the funny thing is, that's our job. My job, my passion, my calling, right? Like change the face of English, being representation, all of that. It's to remind you folks, family members, learners, it's about you. You are the most important thing in the English journey. And you know what? I dare say your life. I dare say your life. I dare say, well, you know what? My life. Right? My life. I am the most important. I am the two most powerful words that I've learned in my language is I am. I am courageous. I am marvelous. I am a learner. It's I. So yes, the question is, if you get a video, if you see people helping you online, how do you make that your own? If Christian has a vision to sit back and change the way that English is perceived, that's his vision. That's his calling. That's his passion. That's his desire. How do you take that and make it your own? That's why I do videos. That's why, because you cannot you have to buy into someone else's vision, but you have to own it. You have to own your life. Scratch that, William. I got to own my life. I got to own the fact that I'm good at things, I'm bad at things, but damn it, at the end of the day, I am a work in progress. I am not the same person that I was yesterday. And when it comes to my English, I better recognize and realize, you know what? I'm better than I was 5 years ago. But if I want to get better in English, what do I got to do? I need to get off my black derriere, get up my ass, make a decision that I'm going to motivate myself, have courage and confidence. If I want to learn something, what does that mean? I have to be consistent. I have to ask questions. I have to realize and recognize that it's okay to make a mistake. I have to recognize and realize that this ain't my first language. And sometimes, William, you need to ask for help. And sometimes, William, you need to ask for questions and do the research before I ask Teacher Christian. I need to be innovative. I need to be proactive. I need to own me and recognize that, darn it, if I want to learn English, I am worthy to learn the language. But that worthiness requires work and sacrifice. And sometimes in my life, I didn't want to sacrifice. I didn't want to pay the price. I didn't want to do the work. I made excuses. I sat in my self-inflicted nonsense, beating myself up, playing negative tapes in my mind, and then I take class with Teacher Christian, and I'm blaming him because I'm too afraid to recognize that, you know what? Sometimes we get over the fact that, oh, we're fear. I'm afraid. I'm fear. Everything you need is on the other side of fear. And in my own life, I have recognized and I've realized that, you know what? It ain't about me being afraid of being unsuccessful. I'm afraid of my own success. I'm afraid and have fear of my own self and the person that I could be.
Man, you know what? You know, no, really, we cannot go up from here. This is the.
I'm not trying to go up, Kristen. I'm just sure like
this is
I'm trying to go up.
this is the pinnacle, right? And I actually want to finish here because I want this to be what people remember at the end. So I'm going to finish. I'm going to say, Teacher Will, you are beyond. You are beyond an English teacher, and people need to listen to what you're saying. That's all I want to say. I want to finish now because I want people to have that as the final thing playing in their brain again and again and again.